up in Mumbai, in India. That's where I was born, and I spent most of my initial years in Mumbai. All the time that I've received education and learning was all in Mumbai, in India. Well, I listened to mostly my father, and of course, all other forms of classical Indian music. So, because that was all that was there in the house, so I heard my father practicing, and my older brother, Aruna Narayan, was a very well-known, renowned sarod player. And he started his music lessons at a very young age, and so he would be practicing, and my father, of course, and then we heard scores of recordings, and discussions about artists and their music, and so that was my background growing up. There's something to be said about being born in a musical family. I think it's in your genes. I think people are drawn to it, and I feel that maybe I am drawn to this music, and especially to this instrument, because of my genes, where I was born. So I just felt that compelled to engage. So my father, Pandit Ram Narayan, took up the sarangi, this instrument that I play and that he plays, in very, very unusual circumstances. The sarangi was for the longest time an instrument that had been sort of abandoned. It was not an socially acceptable instrument to start with, because it had sort of a kind of a dubious background during the Mughal period, the Mughal rulers in India, when it became, part of the court entertainment, and its association with the dancing girls really kept it socially an untouchable kind of an instrument. So for centuries, for at least 2-3 centuries, it remained there. And understandably, there was no development in its physical attributes. No one really took it up and kind of looked at it. No technique was developed. And so it remained there until my father and another great sarangi player, Ustad Bandu Khan, they were the first people who actually made people notice their playing. And Bandu Khan Sahab was, of course, a couple of generations older than my father. So, but my father, in fact, in the 40s and 50s, really sort of addressed the attention on the sarangi because of the work he did on its technical development and the music that was played on it. So he is really responsible for really bringing the sarangi to the forefront, and of course giving it an independent voice, and giving it the basis of a basic technique that is now universally followed, which is wonderful. Well, I started, unfortunately, playing very late. I started my sarangi training at the age of 18. And there's a reason for that. And I think that's an interesting thing, because during the time that I was younger and growing up, my father was, struggling to establish the sarangi as a solo instrument, which had never been played solo before. And so he was in the process of, in his career, trying to establish the sarangi as a solo concert instrument. And as you probably know, as you probably read, the sarangi is probably one of the more technically challenging instruments to play. So we've had very few sarangi players of note. And so it was almost inconceivable at the time that many people would play it as well, and especially women. That was unheard of. So, which is why I think that my inclination towards the sarangi was a little sort of hesitant, was a little bit in the background. And only when I was 18, I decided to tell my father that I would really like to play the sarangi. And when he said that absolutely it was possible to do that, I just took that opportunity and then never looked back. So here is the sarangi. It's carved out of one block of wood. So, and I'll turn this around so you can see the back. So this is the sound box. This is the sound box, and these are how the pegs are. This is carved out. So this is hollowed out in order to hold the strings. And then the strings are resting on a bridge that is on skin that is goat skin, and a bridge, an ivory or bone bridge is resting on a belt, and through this pass the strings that are 40 strings in all. So we have 36 sympathetic strings. And what we have is the tuning. I'll just briefly explain. This is the scale of the rag, or the musical piece that the artist is going to play. And then below this are the chromatic scale. So we have all 12 notes here. And then the main playing strings are just 3. So these are the gut strings. And we have a bow that is very much like the double bass bow. It's a little bit heavier, and it's almost the same length as a double bass bow. So the music we play is, of course, the theory is classical Indian music, and as you may have heard, classical Indian music is unlike Western classical music, is not written down. It's a very oral tradition. So it's really passed down from the guru or the teacher to the student directly. And the basic text of classical Indian music is contained in the very old texts called Sam Ved from the Vedas. So that's where the description of ragas has been written. And much later, in the 20th century, Bhatkande, a music scholar in Maharashtra, actually wrote the grammar of these rags. So we follow, most musicians will follow the principles of that music. But of course, a big part of presenting that music is improvisation. But the improvisation is not the same as we would improvise for, say, in jazz music. In jazz music, it is a lot more free improvisation. But in Indian classical music, it is within the boundaries of that structure of that rag. So a rag is a series of, a scale that is decided on what notes are to be used in the ascending, what notes are to be used in the descending, and then the general melodic line of that rag. And every artist will improvise within those boundaries of those principles. So it is improvisation, but with rules. Well, it's a very interesting story. I actually did a project with Tafel Music Baroque Orchestra, in which we played Vivaldi's Four Seasons, and which was an absolutely wonderful project to do. And we were performing in China. So in Shanghai, after our performance in Shanghai, when we came to the hotel, we saw members of the Kronos Quartet getting into the elevator, and I had no idea about the Kronos Quartet, but the musicians from Tafel Music said, "Oh, did you know this is the Kronos Quartet? They're fantastic string quartet." And that was my first sight. I never met them, but I did see them there. So that was my first interaction, or rather just a sighting of the Kronos Quartet. In fact, they played an adaptation of my father's very well-known pieces of music that he has played, Rag Bhairavi. And Kronos played that piece, and I think it's on one of their CD recordings. That's how I came to know more about them. This instrument is from the same family of all string instruments. So the cello, the violin, the viola, we all, I think, speak the same language. And I think that is, I especially am very privileged and fortunate to become part of this project, because I think that this brings, especially this instrument, which is so rooted in vocal music, has become part of a conversation with Western music. And I think for that, this is indeed a very valuable, what should I say, valuable work together. the differences between Western classical music and Indian classical music, although the instruments are, as I said, from the same family, I think it is the approach and the way in which we use notes. I think that in Indian classical music, we put a lot of emphasis on the notes in between the notes, and in the long notes, in the legatos, where every rag is, the personality of the rag is only shown because of these microtone notes. So we may have, for example, a rag that has the same scale, but in the manner in which each note is approached is different, and that is a big difference between Western and Indian classical music. And so my feeling was that if I am able to convey that kind of an approach in which Western music instruments can be part of, I think that it is just imparting a whole new dimension to it. I think that when we don't have a script in front of us, as in Indian music, I think that we have to really dig deep into our feelings, and also remember the personality of that rag. And so we will every phrase will have to say something. We start with a story. We start with an attitude of, and that really depends on how one is feeling about that piece on that particular moment. So the same rag played at different times would have a completely different outlook, and that all depends on what the artist is feeling at that time. So sometimes it could be joyful, and sometimes the same piece could be very very melancholic, and it could be a very profound and serious sounding piece. So in that sense, and once the artist feels that this particular journey or this particular phrase is going where they want it to go, that's the satisfaction. And at times it works beautifully, and at times it doesn't. Again, I think that this piece hopefully will invite younger string quartets to try, because and try and play it and really make it their own by giving it their own feeling. It really is an attitude that they can imbibe that piece with. So it can be different at all times. You could play it in a different mode all the time. And that I think is something that string quartets would enjoy doing, because it is creative, and it is imaginative, and it is also changeable. It is interchangeable. It is also something that is it's a journey that can be different each time. My main occupation these days is to try and compile, my work by writing about it. And I feel that one of the things that my father has been able to do for this instrument is to develop a very unique technique, the finger technique, the bowing technique. And unfortunately, there is no work by a sarangi player who actually plays the instrument, who can actually put this down on paper. And I've been trying to accomplish that now. I would just like to say, I hope you enjoy playing it. And remember that this piece, I in fact chose it particularly because it is a very versatile piece. So it can, and I have included a few different rounds in which, so it is not really just one major scale. It is a few scales that can be experimented with. So I hope that young people will take that up, change it, add to the theme of the main theme of this piece. I hope they will add their own variations, their own interpretations, because this is a very good piece to do that. The sarangi is such a wonderful instrument. It is, as I said earlier, is so closely related to all string instruments. I really wish that more people would try to learn playing it and enjoy another addition to the string instrument family here in the West.